Hop Frog, The Eight-Chained Orangutans by Edgar Allan Poe. Narrated by Murphy, Dylan, Jasmine, Abby, and Isabel. Once upon a time, although jesters were fading, there was a king who decided to keep his jokester, Hop Frog.
He was fat, crippled, and a dwarf, which is exactly what people wanted for their jester at the time.
Although Hop Frog had a hard time walking, he was very strong and could climb well.
Hop Frog, along with his friend Trippetta, another dwarf who could dance well, were taken from their homes when their country was conquered by the king.
One day, the king decided to have a masquerade party, but no one knew why.
Trippetta decorated the hall with extremely nice things. Everyone in the castle was very excited for the party and had decided their costumes long before the date arrived.
Everyone but the king and his ministers. They waited far too long and finally asked Hop Frog and Trippetta for help.
They were summoned, and the king gave Hop Frog wine as a joke, even though he didn't like it.
He instantly became intoxicated, and the king and his men laughed at Hop Frog. They asked him for costume ideas.
But he couldn't come up with anything, so they gave him more wine, but he refused to drink it.
Then Trippetta decided to step in and begged the king to leave Hop Frog alone.
He acknowledged her only because he thought she was rude. Then he flung her away and threw the wine in her face.
Hop Frog made a grating noise, confusing the king and his ministers. He decided to get back at the king for hurting Trippetta and convince the king and his men to participate in the joke called the Eight-Chained Orangutans.
He coated them in tar and flax, chained them, and told them not to come into the hall until midnight.
When midnight came and the room was full, the king and his men burst into the hall, scaring everyone at the party.
After running around a bit, they ended up in the middle of the hall, where a chandelier should have been hanging, but it was taken out for the party, leaving only the chains.
He tied them to the chandelier chains, and Hop Frog pulled them up towards the ceiling.
Then Hop Frog made the same growling noise that he made when he was summoned by the king and his men. They knew it was him this time.
Hop Frog acted like he didn't know who was tied to the chandelier and pretended to look at them with the light of his torch to the guests' enjoyment.
He lit them on fire and told the guests that it was the king and his ministers who hurt an innocent girl. The ministers weren't any nicer because they encouraged him to do so. He also said that as a jester, it was his last joke.
Hop Frog left through the skylight above him and threw his torch back at the king and his men.
Where it is said that he met Trippetta up there, who helped him with his revenge.
And they went back to their country together. The end.